Men, welcome to the Time to Man Up podcast. It is the week before the Super Bowl. I mean, right? The Big Daddy Super Bowl. And for me as a Bengals fan, anytime the 49ers are involved in a Super Bowl, it gives me flashbacks, right? I mean, two just heartbreaking losses in Super Bowls to the 49ers. Every time I see it, I'm just like, man, flashbacks. But representing Cincinnati Bengals, I'll tell you what, a lot of years of really bad football. And so it is good with the arrival of number 9, Joe Burrows, to have some moxie as a team. Finally, again, not in the Super Bowl. Thought this might be one of those years. Quarterback goes down. Not many teams in the NFL, if their starting quarterback goes down, are going to have much hope to be able to make it. But always love to watch the Super Bowl. The reality is, no matter who's playing, it's just a great football game to watch. So looking forward to that this week. And that's what brought me to what we're going to talk about, is just some stuff that I've been going through in my life, and then the Super Bowl coming up, sports, the significance of sports in many men's lives, many kinds of sports. But the question I have for you today as we start this podcast is, have you ever been part of something bigger than yourself? Right? Something bigger than yourself. And when I think of that, often my mind goes to sports, right? Perhaps you played sports at any level where you were part of a team. It could be at a professional level, at a collegiate level, high school, or even kids programs. Think back to those times when you were part of a team at any level. Or maybe, guys, you say, well, I really wasn't a sports guy. Well, perhaps you have had a job where you were part of a team at that job. You worked as part of a team. You guys worked together for a common purpose. Or maybe those experiences come from you having a group of men in your community that built a strong relationship together. You had strong relationships with men in your community, whether it was you had something in common that you did or you enjoyed to do, and you built that camaraderie. Or maybe even your group, your experience when it comes to what we're going to talk about today would come from a group of men that has come together at your church, and you're part of that group, and you have become tight with each of those men as you have invested in their lives and they have invested in your lives. In this episode of the Time to Man Up podcast, I want to examine 5 challenges that every man will face when they step away from other men. When they step away from those relationships that they have nurtured, that they have worked on. And we know this, those relationships that we build with other men sometimes grow stronger through friction. Sometimes they grow stronger through coming together for a singular purpose that you're trying to accomplish. And as we look at the Super Bowl coming up, there are 2 teams, the Kansas City Chiefs and the 49ers, San Francisco 49ers, who are competing for the pinnacle of the NFL 23-24 season. And so this is a big opportunity for these teams on this stage. But when I think about when these men step away from their teams, when it comes time for them to retire due to just age, injury, whatever it may be, maybe they even get cut. There are a lot of reasons that you're no longer a part of that team. What are the challenges that they go through when they step away, whether willingly or unwillingly, but they step away? Now, for me, I have sports experience, but I'm definitely speaking from my experience of having stepped away from the ministry after 32 years. And even right now, trying to figure out, does that mean getting back into the ministry? Is that I'm done, not going back? God gave me that heart for ministry. And so trying to figure out things. But in the past 14 years before I stepped away, I was at the same church as the lead pastor there, and we built relationships. I headed up the men's ministry with a friend of mine, and we built a strong men's ministry. And with that, you build strong relationships. But when I moved away after 14 years at the same church, everyone moves on. But when you step away, you find yourself sometimes alone. For instance, with the men that are playing in the Super Bowl, there may be some that this will be the last game they ever play. And when they step away from that, the NFL is not going to say, how can we ever carry on, right? I mean, okay, the 49ers, Joe Montana, if you're a football fan and you think of some of the greatest quarterbacks, Joe Montana is in that discussion. Patrick Mahomes, who's playing in the Super Bowl, is part of that discussion. I just lost some of you that are 49er fans, but that's okay. But those are men who what we consider some of the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL. But when Joe Montana stepped away, we didn't think, oh no, the NFL is not going to make it. Why? Because other people step in and fill those voids. The problem is, guys, is that the person that steps away, they are the one that is left with that void. They are the one that is left alone on that island trying to figure out, what does life look like now? So because of the Super Bowl coming up, I'm going to take kind of a sports spin to this as we look at the 5 challenges, and sports kind of illustrates that for us. So in a man's life, there comes a time when they step away from what's been familiar. They find themselves where they once had certainty. Now they find themselves in a world of uncertainty. They find themselves trying to reinvent themselves. And along the way, they can easily forget who they once were. Because these athletes, when they step away from whatever sport they've played, that has been their life. And I'm not just talking for the 10 years or however many years they played professional sports. I'm talking about all of those T-ball games for a baseball player, all those coach pitch, little league, and all the way through. That was all part of a process of getting them to where they were. It's just what we remember is their college days and professional days. But now they find themselves where they once had certainty in a place of uncertainty. What is next? For some men, they handle that really well. But for other men, they don't handle it well. Because when you have to try to reinvent yourself, you can find yourself alone and not even knowing who you are. And what we have to understand, men, is that can be a very dark place in a man's life. A place that is not only dark, but it's hard to get out from. Every athlete comes to a place in their career when they have to step away from the game, again, whether they like to or whether they really don't want to. That time comes. There are some who navigate this transition well, and there are some who struggle and continue to even struggle. I can remember my last games. I mean, like they were yesterday. I can remember that. And I can remember the difficult transitions. I remember my last high school soccer game, walking off the field. And I know that sounds really weird, but I remember that like it was yesterday. I mean, it's amazing just the details of that. I remember when my soccer career came to an end in college, and 2 years too soon. But not because of injury, not because of anything else, except I made a bad decision and walked away. I just had gotten tired of some things and I stepped away, and it was a bad decision. If you're like me, when you're younger, you make a lot of those bad decisions. And even in an older age, we still have our tendency to make some bad decisions. But I walked away with 2 years of eligibility still remaining. Again, not one of my best decisions, but God has a plan in every decision we make, even the bad decisions. He has a plan. So when my boys played hockey and they got to the end of their time playing hockey, I told both of them, I said, when it comes time, that last game, stop, breathe it all in, except I guess the locker room, because if you've ever had a kid that plays hockey, hockey equipment stinks. I think it's probably the worst sport for stinky equipment, because hockey equipment, they play, they get sweaty, and then they pack it in a bag, and some guys leave it in their car. It's some nasty junk, man. But so maybe you don't want to take that smell in, but I just wanted to encourage them to remember everything about it, because before you know it, it's gone. And then all you can do is remember back to what was. So I encourage my boys to soak in every moment. I wanted them to enjoy it because I knew that it would come and go so quickly. So as we look at these 5 challenges to stepping away, the first challenge that we have is this: attention, right? When you're an athlete on a team, you get attention from others. Now, we must understand that some of that attention is good, some of that attention is not so good. But people recognize you. Even playing in a small college or a small high school. I mean, growing up in Ohio, there were some small high schools where football was life. And if you were on the football team, you didn't have to be a star. You got recognized, right? If you were part of any team on that day when you wore your jerseys to school, you walked around town in your jerseys, whatever it was, you got recognized. You got attention. And it's the same way that I remember one time being at a mall in Indianapolis when we were working in Indianapolis. And for you that can go back in your NFL knowledge, we were at the mall and Warren Moon was there. And Warren Moon was just walking through the mall, and it was like nobody noticed him. And the minute I saw him, I'm like, that's Warren Moon. And I wanted so bad to go over and talk to him, but I've always thought those poor guys can't go anywhere and have privacy. Everybody's always on him, and my wife and I were sitting there, and I was like, I'm not going to go over there and talk to him. But I was like, that was so cool, right? It meant nothing. He was never going to know I was there, but it was just a cool moment. Why? Because of their position, they get attention. For some people, it's at their job that they get attention because of their position, because of what they do. But when you step away from that position, when you step away from that sport, it can seem like no one cares about you anymore. I mean, just recently, we've had a number of people die that it seemed like they were at the center of everything, whether it was acting, music, sports, whatever it was, they got attention for what they were doing. And then they stepped away and they just disappeared. And the next time you hear about them is when they die. And for some men, when you step away from that loss of attention is difficult. For me as a pastor, being that senior pastor, the one that people were looking at for leadership, and then I step away from that, and now it's me and my wife. We move away. Man, praise God, we've got our family near us, but you move away, and it's like, what's next? What do we do? What is that like? And you can find yourself alone. It is difficult for a man to go from being the center of attention where people recognize them to nothing. I mean, in my last church, I could walk around the city of Troy, and there were a number of people, not just my church people, but a number of people, because I was active in the community, that would know who I was. And then I go to a place where no one really knows who I am, and therefore it makes it easier to just get lost. And that's not the greatest of places to be. So whether it's sports or whether you're stepping away from a job, or maybe your job even moves you to another place, the forming of a new situation, the challenge can be is being, where people acknowledge you. You have people's attention because of who you are, what you've done, or what you were doing. The second thing for a person, an athlete, when a man steps away is competition. There are some men that thrive on competition. Guys, I am one of those men. I mean, I can turn something that's not a competition into a competition. And my wife and I always laugh because one of our favorite games that we grew up playing early in our married years was Aggravation. It's a board game. Maybe some of you don't even know what Aggravation is, but I never really purposed to win the game. I purposed to send my wife's marbles back home. And so it's this marble game, and you have to go around the little board. And if I had an opportunity to go home or to send her, I was sending her. And that drove her crazy. And I mean, even when we would have people over, I was all about sending people home. That was my competition. My competition wasn't winning. But we can make everything a competition, right? One of the things that came to my mind when I thought about this is Days of Thunder, right? Remember when Cole Trickle and Rowdy Burns are in the hospital from their accident, and they're in the wheelchairs, and they see each other and they begin to race down the hall in wheelchairs. And there are some people that watch that, and maybe it's a lot of females that watch that and say, that's stupid. And I'm like, that's awesome, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to have a good wheelchair race down a hallway to be able to do that? Though I will say this, last time I was in a wheelchair, we were making a video and I was in a wheelchair. I flipped back, hit my head on the cement, concussion. Didn't go well. So we try to stay out of those wheelchairs. But then later on, Cole and Rowdy, they rent cars and they're driving for a meeting and they are banging those cars. They destroy those rental cars because it was a competition. Competition is a regular part of the life for many, not all, but most men. It's part of their life. And stepping away from it leaves a void that must be replaced. And that's why you'll have many, say, professional baseball players or even players that made it to the college, that they'll have adult baseball leagues so that they can continue that competition. And where they don't have that, they join a softball team, a traveling softball team, whatever it would be. And then you've got us, like us church softball guys, right? I mean, we have played church softball with those guys who think they're in the majors. And what I think is this. So I love church softball. I'm competitive. I love it. I love doing it with my brothers and just playing on the same team. But have you ever been at that church softball where the guy comes in and he is dressed in the best baseball pants, fancy shirt, he's got the arm sleeve on, he's got the fancy cleats, he's got like 4 bats in his backpack, and it's like multiple gloves. And I mean, it looks like he just came from the traveling softball team, right? And we've seen those guys, which just like all of a sudden, like my mind goes on this rabbit trail. And I always, I was able to, when my kids were young, because I was in a smaller church, I was able to coach my kids' sports. As we moved to another church and it was bigger, I didn't have the time to do that. But I always found it humorous when we would go to our games for kids baseball and you would have that coach that came out in his full gear. He had all the nice pants, whatever it was, he had his pants. I used to be, for me, they always had to show the stirrups because I liked the stirrups, but now they have it all low and they had their chains on, their baseball chains and whatever. I mean, they were looking to roll their Oakley expensive glasses, and they would come out to coach their team, and all the other coaches are looking at them like, are you serious? were coaching T-ball. We're doing coach pitch, and they would get on the mound for coach pitch. And it was like, man, they were going through warm-ups. I mean, they were ready to throw a no-hitter, right? The purpose of coach pitch is to get your kids to hit the ball. But all the other coaches were in T-shirts and shorts, right? T-shirts and shorts. And it's so funny when you see that guy. Sorry if you're that guy, but it's funny when you see that because we're like, it's kids' sports. I mean, most baseball teams wear that. Why? Because it identifies them with that team. But when your kids are young, it's just like, man, it's like they had directly come from the pros to coach kids. And I'll tell you this. Here's my second rabbit trail with this, I guess. Someone who is really a good athlete, and I've learned this in times, but someone who is a real good athlete never needs to tell people and seldom shows them everything they have on the field or on the court. They don't have to do that. It's usually the people that are telling you how great they are the people that really aren't that good at all. I remember a friend of mine who had played professional basketball, not in the NBA, but across seas. And we were playing one day, and I didn't know how good he was. I knew he was good, but I really didn't know how good he was until we had a guy that was like acting like he was Michael Jordan. And I was just like, this is crazy. I mean, this is crazy. And he started talking crud to my friend, and I could tell my friend was getting frustrated to the point of ticked off. And all of a sudden, now I've never seen him dunk the ball. He did this fancy dribbling. The guy falls down. He jukes him like crazy and dunks the ball. And all of us, I mean, this is faculty and staff that are playing, okay? And we're all just standing there with our jaws like, oh, what just happened? And he just looks at me and smiles and runs down the court. And I'm like, dude, he's amazing, right? And this is a guy that didn't even play in the NBA. And I was like, he is amazing. Okay, I'm back from the rabbit trail. Got rid of all the people wearing the fancy outfits to coach kids kids baseball and people that think they're so great. But let's get to the third challenge. And I think the third challenge is one that we will come back and visit because it's so important. And that's this, the brotherhood. There is a brotherhood that develops through sports. It is often one of the most difficult things to step away from. I mean, even in playing church softball with my guys up in Ohio, I loved it more than, I didn't like the pulled muscles and soreness as I hit 50 and kept playing with the young bucks. I didn't like that, all that pain. But what I loved was hanging out with the guys. And it is often one of the most difficult things to step away from. When they ask athletes what they miss the most, you would think it was the money and things like that, but most of them have done well enough that they have enough money saved. But what they miss the most often is the brotherhood, the camaraderie that they had as part of a team. Competing as a team builds a bond that is difficult to break. It's the same for a man who steps away from his job and leaves the brotherhood that he has built for years, right? You've got people at your job that you have formed a relationship with. You've got men who you formed a brotherhood. And when you step away from that, it's difficult. And you have to find something to fill that void because the void is real. The bond formed with a group that works together, that travels together, that plays together and shares life together every day is difficult to duplicate outside of that team atmosphere, whether it be sports or work, whatever it is, it's difficult. But every man needs a brotherhood. For me, guys, that's been one of the most difficult things is I left a brotherhood. I left a brotherhood where people looked to me, and I was one of the leaders of that brotherhood to encourage and to get people to press on, but they were also there for me. And then you move away from that, and the brotherhood continues on because they're still there, but you find yourself on an island trying to figure life out, and that's a challenge. God did not create us to live life alone. But when a man steps away from the brotherhood, he can easily find himself feeling like he's alone on an island. The reality is he's not, but it feels like that. And that's not a healthy place for a man to find himself. The fourth challenge is this: a regular routine. Many men find comfort in a regular routine. Now, listen, I love to live outside the lines, right? I love that. I love to go out into the unknown and figure things out. I'm learning now that I've done that, having stepped away from the ministry, that it is a butt kicker, okay? It's a butt kicker. But I love getting outside the lines, doing crazy things, but I also find comfort in a regular routine. I, Most of you have a routine when you get up in the morning, right? When you go to bed at night, there's an order of what you do things. You do this, 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 and you do them in that order every morning, every night, right? I mean, it's like clockwork. The alarm goes off. For some of you, your regular routine is laying in bed until the next alarm goes off. Some of you, you jump right up and you're in the shower because if you don't do that, you're going to go back to sleep. But you have a routine. Maybe that routine is that you stop at the same place every morning for coffee, donut, whatever, to get you going. You may even drive the same way to work every day. There are times when I was in Ohio and there's an easy path to take to get to work, but I would find myself often taking different paths to work because it just changed things up. We had a circle. They called it a square. It was a circle in the middle of town, but they called it a square. And I would sometimes go around it multiple times. And there were times even we had a camera downtown, and I would call people and I'd say, hey, I'm going to be driving through the square. Watch for me. And they could get on that, and I would drive, and I would even wave my hand out while I was driving around it. And some people probably thought I was an idiot because there were times when I would go around about 4 times in a row. And if there were people standing on the corner, it was so funny to see their face as I was doing that. But you have a routine in what you do. Every athlete has a routine too. I remember Wade Boggs. Now, if you're younger, you probably don't remember Wade Boggs, but Wade Boggs was one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball. And before every game, he would eat fried chicken. I mean, I can't imagine with as many games as they play. What baseball plays, like 162 games, 164, something like that. And that's a lot of chicken. But I remember that was part of what he did. And this is a guy that was a Hall of Famer, just an amazing hitter. And some would call that a superstition. I would call it a routine that he had done and continued that routine. But you watch guys that play baseball and they get up there and they fidget with their batting gloves and they do all this different things. Why? Because it's a routine. A golfer goes through a routine. Everybody goes through a routine. I mean, when we think about that, every athlete has somewhat that routine that they walk through. And then what happens is you leave, you step away, and now you don't have that same routine. And so you have to create a new routine. And so when men find themselves without a regular routine, it puts them in a scary situation, a difficult situation, and they have to learn to live life without the old routine and to develop a new routine that fits where they are. And then the final challenge is this: purpose. A man without a purpose can also be a dangerous man. Men need a purpose that is greater than themselves, right? A pro athlete has a purpose. Now, I would say this: a pro athlete has a lot of purposes, or you could even call some goals, but often their greatest purpose is together as a team, right? Because you can have a goal and this person can have a goal that are on teams together, but you've got to have a purpose, a singular purpose. And that singular purpose is to be the best in the NFL, to go to the Super Bowl, to win the Super Bowl, and no one can ever take that from you. You will always be remembered for that. But being an old school guy, I remember Dan Marino. And anytime I think about the Super Bowl, I think of Dan Marino. And I mean, here is a guy that was one of the greatest quarterbacks ever in the history of the NFL, and yet he never won a Super Bowl. Now, not winning a Super Bowl doesn't change his greatness, but I would guarantee you that Dan Marino would give up some of the records that he held just to have that Super Bowl and to be able to know that they had achieved the purpose as a team of winning the Super Bowl. But it doesn't make his statistics, his career, any less impressive. But his desire was to have that purpose to win the Super Bowl with his team. So in a man's life, a man can get his purpose from a lot of different places. A man in his marriage can give him purpose. A man's kids can give him purpose. And you say, well, I'm not married and I don't have kids, so where do I get my purpose from? Well, we took the obvious two first, because a man can get his purpose from his job. A man can get his purpose from his community, his role in his community. What is he doing? What is he trying to accomplish? A man's relationships can give him purpose. But ultimately, and you know where we're going to go, is a man's relationship with God gives him ultimately his purpose. And it is played out in areas like his marriage, his family, his job, his community, and his relationship. But men need to have a purpose that is greater than themselves. And so the 5 challenges when we step away, and though we look at it from a sports perspective, with it being Super Bowl week, we also have to understand that stepping away from a job, stepping away from a church, stepping away from a community, moving to another community, the 5 challenges are: when you move into a new community, when you move into a new job, you don't have the attention that you once had. Maybe the competition changes, and where you had a competition over here, now it changes and it's totally different, and you have to create what is that atmosphere that you can thrive in. The brotherhood, when you have spent so much time with men in one area and you leave and no longer are they there, their brotherhood continues at that job, at that sports team, at that church. Their brotherhood continues. You are the one, because you have stepped away, that has to figure out what that looks like. And then a regular routine. Having that regular routine that you go through that again equates with, points you in the direction of, number 5, the purpose. So those are the 5 challenges that we face in stepping away. All of these can be a challenge for men when they step away from what they are doing, what they've done for a long time. But I want to end by going back to really the catalyst of this episode. Men, every man needs to be part of a brotherhood. God never intended for you to live life on your own. For you who are married, your wife is not the same as the brotherhood. You need men in your life who are investing in you, and you are investing in them. Back in my church in Ohio, there was a push to get women to play on the men's softball team because a few of the teams had women that were playing on their team. Usually it was because they did not have enough guys, and so they opened it up to women, and I fought against that. And I was like, I'm willing to be the bad guy. Why? Because I understood the importance of that brotherhood of men getting together on Friday nights and playing softball, competing together, building relationships, and just having that camaraderie that happens in the dugout, on the field. And I said, you can form another team, but this team is staying that way. And it wasn't because we didn't want women to participate. It was that women coming into that would change the entire aspect of the team. It would no longer be a brotherhood. It would totally change it. Guys, you need men in your life who are investing in you, and you are investing in them. When life removes you from the brotherhood, don't waste time building a relationship that will lead to the development of another brotherhood. If you find yourself alone, begin finding a couple men to start a new brotherhood. You don't have to get back. Maybe you left a brotherhood with 10 people in it. Start small, build it up. It may take a little work, but it's always worth the effort. The enemy likes men to be on an island because they are vulnerable to his attack. Men, do you have men that have your back? If not, start developing those relationships yesterday. You got me, right? It's time to restore the brotherhood, men. If you do not have that brotherhood in your life, it is time to build that brotherhood. If you had it, it's time to restore it. Men, it's time. It's time to man up. I'm going to end with this because it just makes me feel better, and I'm going to give you a big hooday, right? As a Bengals fan, I'm just going to say hooday, and I'm just going to hope that I don't have any flashbacks to those previous Super Bowls against the 49ers where it didn't go well, and maybe someday we'll get up there. And I'll tell you what, you 49ers and Chiefs fans, have a good weekend cheering on your team. Take care, guys.